to India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
Welcome to Take Me With You, episode 45. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Cheryl. We are two well-traveled people who want to go everywhere.
But that's not going to happen. So instead, we'll travel vicariously by inviting a guest to share their unique travel stories with us.
Today, we are talking to Elizabeth and Ben. They live in Seattle. Elizabeth is a teacher, and Ben works for Mir. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Mir. Okay, so I've never heard of Mir before, but can you tell us about it?
Sure. So Mir is a Seattle-based company. We make stainless steel insulated water bottles and tumblers and other products as well. And one of the things that we're most proud about at Mir is we actually give 3% of our revenue to sustainable giving projects, primarily in the clean water, sustainable healthy environments and strong community spaces. So that's a really important part of what we do. All of our products have a tracking code on them that you can see what project your purchase funded. So it's a
Oh, wow.
yeah,
That's
it's an awesome company. I'm really proud to work for them.
That's very cool. Nice. Well, we're happy to have you two on. And you guys are not originally from the Seattle area. Where are you from originally?
We're from Texas. I was born and raised in Austin, and then Ben traveled around a little bit.
Yeah, my dad worked in the oil and gas industry, so we moved around quite a bit when I was younger, including living abroad for a period of time. But I spent the last 10 years in Texas before moving up to beautiful Washington.
And
Where
what
did
was
you
the
live?
abroad?
Yeah.
So they're both like, wait, where?
Abroad was a fun country called Azerbaijan.
Oh.
Sounds
Yeah.
fake.
Sounds fake, yeah. That's what I thought
It's
when
real, Cheryl.
that's what I thought when my parents told me where we were going. No, it's very much a real place. It's located on the Caspian Sea, near the Caucasus Mountains, south of Russia, north of Iran. It's a very interesting place, especially for a 15-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long were you there?
So I was there for about a year, whereas my dad ended up spending 3 years there, and then he actually wrapped up his career in the Middle East, in Oman. So kind of all over the place, but for me as a high schooler, it was a really cool opportunity to see some places that I never would have traveled otherwise.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And did you
Wow, that's
do
super cool.
any traveling when you were living there?
Yeah, I got to go on a service project trip with my class to Tanzania, East
wow.
Africa, which was awesome. Got to go to the Ngorongoro crater and do the whole safari thing, see Kilimanjaro. So that was a pretty awesome trip for me. We also got to volunteer to help bring supplies and kind of start the construction of a school classroom in a local community there, which was
nice.
pretty neat. Yeah, and then we got to kind of just travel around. Central Asia is an interesting place. We visited Istanbul when I was there.
Not Constantinople?
Not constant, yeah.
Sorry, I have to.
Waiting for that one.
The coolest city name, I think, of all time. Yeah. Yeah, and then just a bunch of other places. But I mean, I think it definitely kind of sparked my travel bug, I guess you could say. I spent that was my first time ever being abroad, was that experience, and so it
Wow.
Wow. That's a whopper of a first time.
yeah, it was a doozy for sure, but it showed me some really unique places, and I think gave me an appreciation for kind of how other people live and how different other parts of the world are, and how they all have their kind of own unique inherent value. And yeah, it's been kind of a foundational thing for me, wanting to just see new places and see places that are kind of off the beaten path.
So cool. Wow. That's very neat.
Yeah, but 15-year-old me probably wouldn't have had the same answer.
He just wanted his Xbox in Azerbaijan, and if he had his Xbox, he was fine.
Yeah.
So I think that that actually leads really well into we've got a set of questions that we typically ask our guests to start out with. And so you can each answer these individually. But the first one is, why do you travel?
I think like what Ben says, and we feel this living up in Seattle too. Seattle seems like a gateway for adventure. As soon as we check one thing off the list, we add 5 or 10 more. And I think that's the way it is with travel. It's just like a never-ending book. I mean, even if you visit a country, you still haven't visited every part of it or gotten to experience all the different cities or all the different lifestyles or even all the different seasons. So it's just a continuing adventure that I think draws us in. And I mean, when we got back from our last trip, we started saving up for our next trip. So we just, I think it's addictive for sure, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the adventure piece is a big part of it. Just experiencing new things and trying out foods that we're not used to, or activities that we've never done before. I think for me, and this is something that my parents really instilled in me when I was younger, is that traveling really expands your world, literally and figuratively. And I think getting out of your comfort zone a little bit and experiencing new places, I think can only make you a more empathetic person and allows you to understand more about other people who are maybe different from you, and kind of just gives, I think more travel is only a good thing in terms of people understanding each other. And so for us, experiencing a new place and new people, it's sometimes uncomfortable and sometimes a little scary. But those experiences, I think, make us better people.
Mm-hmm.
Great answer. I mean, not like we've had any bad answers on this podcast, but it's a good answer. Well, yes, it is fun, isn't it? So next question, what type of traveler are you?
I feel like we're a good balance. I think we definitely set agendas for wherever we're going and kind of must-see places or must-see things that we want to do. And then we kind of just leave other parts open to allow for spontaneity or other things. We rely on other people a lot for travel. When we went to Madrid, I had a friend who taught there for a year, and she sent us this super detailed, incredible, I'll share it with you, plan for Madrid, and we lived by that and did everything on the list. And then when we went to Italy last summer, my family lives there, and I'd never met them before, and it was uncomfortable at first because I speak very broken Italian and hadn't met them, and but we just relied on them for 3 days to show us around. So we allowed for spontaneity there. So I think we have a good balance of planning versus spontaneity. And then we obviously try to be cheap travelers as much as possible. And we definitely...
Cheap is a bad word.
We're really good at budgeting. We spend a long time budgeting for our trips to make sure that when we are on the trips, we don't feel bad about going out to a nice dinner or trying something new or spontaneously getting a helicopter ride in Hawaii or something like that because we had the money set aside. So we're definitely budgeters is a better description, maybe.
So when you say budgeting, it sounds like you're talking about upfront. So saving and making sure you have enough money so that while you're on the trip, you don't have to worry about it. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we track all of our purchases while we're on the trip too to make sure that everything evens out at the end. But yeah, it kind of depends how big the trip is, but we're trying to save for a South America trip, which is bigger. So we started saving last month for that. And it's just kind of whatever extra money in our budget we put toward that fund.
That's cool. So with that, one of, I think, the travel questions that Ryan and I like a lot as just an add-on is, what is your favorite thing to skimp on, and what's your favorite thing to splurge on?
I would say our favorite thing to skimp on is kind of I guess like the traditional highlights of a place that we're going to, in the sense of, we visited Prague this summer, and there's the famous Prague Castle, which is beautiful and I'm sure very impressive on the inside, but we didn't go inside the Prague Castle and saved some money there, by not paying that admission fee. I think we've been able to not feel obligated to do things and expensive things in whichever city we find ourselves in, just because it says so, like in a travel book. So I think being able to sort of prioritize our experiences with what it is that we actually want to do, rather than what we feel like we have to do, is something that we, I guess you could say, skimp on. And then we like to splurge on spontaneous, really fun things that just come up. Liz alluded to it a little bit earlier, but we were in Hawaii this year, and we found ourselves at the end of our trip, and since we had budgeted for that trip, we noticed that we had, this sounds super type A also, which is totally Liz's
That's
domain.
Okay.
But we found that we had some extra funds, and we're like, why don't we go on a helicopter ride and see the island? And it was the total highlight of the trip, but definitely a splurge.
That's awesome.
So that planned spontaneity then
Yeah.
is kind of seems like where that is. Yeah. That's awesome.
With tracking your budget, I'm curious, like, do you use an app for that? Do you have a spreadsheet that you made? Like, how do you keep track of your budget on the trip?
I used to have a pretty ratchet spreadsheet, but now we use Every Dollar by Dave Ramsey, that app. We love it. And so we kind of live by that for budgeting for travel and other big expenses and day-to-day everything, really.
Okay, so final question, and then we will get into your actual travel story. And that's, what is your number one travel tip?
My number one travel tip, and this is kind of really more of like a life maxim, I think, that I just tend to live by, is to be super flexible. Like, traveling always, something goes wrong or something doesn't go according to plan. And I think it can kind of diverge in two directions from there. It could become a really stressful event and ruin parts or the entire trip. Or it can become an opportunity for something new to happen. Or to just make a really funny story at a later date. So just always being willing to experience the unexpected and kind of roll with it is I think a really important part of traveling, and to also bring more clean socks than you think you need.
Nice.
All right.
Sounds like there's like personal experience behind that one.
Definitely.
I think my tip, I live by my water bottle. I could tell you every time I've lost it because it's very dramatic. So I always try to bring reusable things when I travel, especially to mitigate waste. I think I've been very conscious of that now that we travel more, and his company's actually posted some really cool articles interviewing people who are big travelers and who are trying to reduce waste. And so they'll bring their own cutlery, and they'll bring their own bottles, and they'll bring their own straws and different things like that, especially when you're on a plane or something. You can deny that cup or whatever it is. So I always have my water bottle. I was actually in South Carolina last week, spontaneously visiting some family, and I left my water bottle in the car as they dropped me off, and I was already through security, but I went through security again. I didn't want to leave it behind, and my dad knew how important it was, so he knew he had to circle back.
Oh, wow.
A little dramatic, but
she's serious about her hydration.
yeah, definitely. And you save so much money, especially in European countries where you have to buy bottled water and there isn't as much public water fountains or anything like that. It's a lot cheaper just to use the tap at your Airbnb or hotel or whatever and just bring your bottle.
Yes. However, I would add if you're doing that, I would say it's worth stopping in a local grocery store and getting a lemon, because the water from the tap in Europe does not always taste great.
That is a great point. Great suggestion.
Good call.
Actually, there's this stuff called True Lemon. They're these little packets of like dehydrated lemon.
Oh.
And if you just add it to your water, it tastes like you put like a quarter of a lemon in it, and it's wonderful.
Oh,
So
that's nice.
I keep them at work, and I just keep them all over because I love flavored beverages, but there's no sweetener in it or anything. And so, yeah, those would be good for travel.
That's a great idea.
Awesome. Cool. All right. So it's time to move into your travel story. So what trip are you going to tell us about today?
I think we'll talk about the most recent one just because it's
Fresh in our minds.
Yeah, fresh on our minds. Also, not really a spontaneous trip. We decided to go probably 2 months before we left. One of my little sisters, Mary Beth, she's an incredible photographer. And she's about to enter her senior year at the University of Texas, and she's studying photojournalism. And she was doing a program in Prague for a month, with a really awesome professor. And it's just a photography program. And she got to be there during some of the protests, and she got some incredible pictures of that. And my whole family, which there's 7 in my immediate family, so it's like a fleet whenever we go anywhere. We were all going to go visit Mary Beth and do a family trip in Prague, but that didn't end up working out. But Ben and I were like, well, we still want to go. So we decided to visit Mary Beth at the tail end of her trip, right when she finished the program, so she could spend time with us. So we spent 3.5-ish days in Prague, and she got to be our tour guide, which was a lot of fun. And it was cool for her because she got to revisit places that she maybe went in the beginning of her trip one last time.
That's cool.
Yeah, and got to be the tour guide and share her past month with us. And then we flew to Munich and then rented a car in Munich and drove to Kitzbühel, Austria. And the border crossing was not exciting at all. It was just a sign on the side of the road. That's it.
Kind of the point
Welcome
of the
to the
European
EU.
Union.
I was disappointed. We spent 2 days in Kitzbühel, and then we drove to Vienna, and then spent 3 days in Vienna, and then we flew out of Dublin. That was just the cheapest way to get over to Europe, and so we spent about a day and a half in Dublin, and then came home.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's
Wow.
so cool.
it was kind of a random country list.
Yeah, it kind of came together in a way where it was like Mary Beth is in Prague, so we know we have to go there. And then where is nearby that we had wanted to go before? And I've always wanted to visit Vienna. It's a fascinating city to me. So much history there, and just really kind of a crossroads of like East and West Europe and all of that. And then Liz really, she was like, if we're going to be in Austria, we need to go to the Alps. Like, we can't just not see that. And so that's where the Kitzbühel detour was born. And I mean, it ended up being a really cool way to kind of split the two cities. Like Prague and Vienna are both very, Prague is the beautiful old medieval city with all the Gothic architecture and spires and everything. And then Vienna is just such a hub of everything, so many museums and so much to see, that it was really cool having this kind of break in between them. where we got to go to this small alpine town and just kind of unplug a little bit. And then we did some hiking, and so it ended up being a really nice kind of cadence of the trip.
So let's start in Prague and kind of work our way through and kind of tell us some of the things that you did. But I'm especially interested because of what you mentioned earlier, where you don't necessarily do all of the typical things. So you said like you saw the outside of the castle in Prague, didn't go inside. So what things were worth it to you that are like the big things to do, and why? And then what did you skip and what did you do instead?
I think an important note here is that Ben loves history / Wikipedia, and he went to Germany for work and then brought home like this German history book and had finished it because he wanted to learn more, which is great. Like, I'm a teacher, I love learning, but I am also like way more of an impatient person and need to be active in doing things, and so I couldn't do like a day of history or like museums. And Mary Beth and I would joke behind Ben's back because we'd be walking around places like Vienna and he'd just be like Wikipediaing everywhere, like, that's this was built in this time, like these people conquered this but then these people stole it, and we're like, okay. So I may have some kind of push when we skip some things because I'd rather just walk around and experience a lot of stuff. But he is good about like stopping and appreciating and reading all the plaques and then summarizing them for me and Mary Beth. But yeah, we skipped out on the castle. I feel like there were other things we didn't pay for that we just didn't want to do because they cost a lot of money.
Yeah, well, so in Prague, Liz and I planned nothing.
Yeah.
Because we were going to see Mary Beth, who had been there for a little over a month, and we wanted her to be able to kind of share her experience with us and not have it like colored with our expectations or what we wanted to do necessarily. For most of the time, we just sort of wandered the city, and she showed us some of her favorite local spots. We kind of hit some of the highlights, I guess you'd say, like the Charles Bridge over the river is obviously hugely famous, and so we walked across that and got to see some of the vendors there. But I think the coolest parts of Prague for us were getting to see where she had spent time with her friends and where she had eaten and where she, being in a city for more than 3 days, you get to kind of settle in a little bit and live more like people who actually live there. So I think she was able to kind of give us that experience in a condensed version in Prague. We did go to a couple of museums. We went to the Communism Museum in Prague, which it was really fascinating for me,
Really?
especially. Love history.
I just went through it a lot faster than you.
You did. But yeah,
It's a good compromise.
Yeah.
It's basically a museum that sort of outlines the history of communism in formerly Czechoslovakia, what's now the Czech Republic, mostly after World War II, and sort of the fallout from all of that and the Soviet control over the area. And it was just a really interesting look into a piece of history that I was unfamiliar with. So I mean, that's my like favorite part about traveling is you have these major events that happen and that occur that are just kind of a footnote in our history books, but it's obviously one of the single most important things to everyone who lived there. So getting to actually fully appreciate that was really cool.
It was really interesting. My favorite part about not favorite part because I don't like communism, but favorite part about the museum was they talked about this crazy, I guess not phenomenon, but they would have these like aerobics days every year in Prague and the whole country pretty much had to come out, and they would do these like very creepy synchronized dances and workouts. So they would have these like workout days where everyone. The picture was just so funny to me. It was like an 80s workout movie, but stricter and
But
political and mandatory.
Wow.
But they wanted everybody to be like fit and fun, and so they had to all wear the same thing, and then they had like games and competitions too, but it just seems so like Greek Olympic competition style, and then the mandatory part was just bizarre too. But
so it's like countrywide gym class for adults.
Yes.
Then.
Exactly. Yeah, that was super cool.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we went to the film museum, which was awesome. It just opened up in Prague. And Mary Beth was really excited to go because she couldn't go before because it had just opened. And it was super interactive. I recommend it to anybody who goes to Prague. You're just playing with stuff the whole time. And so they go from like
the kind of museum.
Yeah, very beginning stages of like shadows and creating shadows and moving shadows to creating noises in a studio, to like stop real stuff. And you got to like make your own movies and make your own sounds and practice like rolling the film. And
Cool.
it was super neat. It's just a small, tiny little museum, but that one was really fun too. And it was also 100 degrees outside. It was during that European heat wave that people were dying.
It was brutal.
It was really bad. So museums were
Inside activities
with air conditioning. So
Inside activities.
yeah, I'm really happy we went to the film museum too. I don't think about anything else for Prague. Lots of beer gardens.
Cool.
Of course.
Pilsner coal everywhere.
Yeah. There are no craft beers in Prague. It's just the Pilsner beer, the one brand. And so you order beer at a restaurant, and it's either the Pilsner or the Pilsner. Like, that's it. You just get the Pilsner. So cuts down on decision making. But yeah, lots of just hanging out. People just enjoy grabbing a drink and watching other people go by, which I'm sure is a theme in all of Europe. But it was fun getting to see the little spots. Mary Beth would do that with her friends during her program.
Nice. Okay, and then what was next?
So next, we flew from Prague to Munich and landed in Munich and rented a car.
What kind of car?
Well, on the car rental website, it was Honda Civic or similar, but it ended up a Mercedes C-Class convertible, which I guess is
Honda Civic or similar.
Yeah, I guess that's their Honda Civic in Germany.
Oh my gosh! I guess you're in Germany.
Yeah,
That's so funny.
Yeah, it was cool at first until we opened up the trunk and saw the trunk space, which was a problem.
And Mary Beth. Mary Beth is very fashionable, so she had a big suitcase of clothes and
Not
gifts.
what you would call a light traveler.
No, and gifts that she got for her friends, and so she had this massive suitcase that we named Bertha. And Bertha would not fit in the back, so Bertha was jammed in the back seat with Mary Beth.
Bertha was our fourth passenger.
Yeah.
Luckily, Liz and her sister are both very tiny humans, so they were able to be compact and fit in. But the car was very fun to drive, which was great. And so we had some lunch in Munich, which was kind of a cool stopover. We figured, why not? We're here. And then we made our way to Kitzbühel, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive from Munich into the mountains. And Kitzbühel is a very famous ski area in Western Austria. There's apparently a really intense ski hill called the...
but they do like Red Bull downhill skiing challenges, and if you watch it, it's terrifying because it's just like this, and then you're going down these super tight turns, and they keep talking about how icy it is.
Is it the Strife?
Strife, yeah, Streif. Yeah. So yeah, Kitzbühel is a very famous ski area with an apparently legendary
ski hill called the Strife.
You should watch Red Bull videos on
Streif, which I think would probably kill any mere mortal who tried to ski down it.
Wow.
But
I
beautiful.
have zero desire to do that.
Yeah.
Not interested.
Beautiful area in, a really green alpine valley in the Austrian Alps.
Yeah, very picturesque.
Drive through it and Sound of Music plays everywhere you're going. And yeah, we spent a couple of days in Kitzbühel. Liz planned out a hike for us to go on.
I think this is the best part of the whole trip.
Yeah, this is one of those parts of the trip that I was talking about earlier about being flexible and willing to have new experiences that you can laugh about later.
Yeah. So we kind of divided up the planning of the trip. So Mary Beth had Prague, obviously, and then Ben had Vienna because he was most excited about that. And I thought Vienna was a different city than it actually was. So I just gave that to him. And then...
Wait. What city did you think it was?
I have no idea. I guess I thought it was in the Alps, and I was really disappointed that it wasn't because I didn't know my geography of Austria, which is why I added Kitzbühel. Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So I knew that it existed. I just thought it existed in a different geographic location than it is.
I mean, I'm glad you didn't think it was mythical or anything.
Yes.
So.
No, not a brigadier or anything like that. But... yes, I was very excited about Kitzbühel, but then I was also very anxious when we got there because the forecast just said rain and thunderstorms the entire time. And the whole point we were in Kitzbühel was to hike. And it's a ski town, so it's like going to, I don't know, Stevens Pass in the summer. Like, there's definitely things to do, but it's not...
The summer's the off season.
Yeah, the summer's the off season. So some restaurants were closed, places were closed. There weren't that many people there. It seemed like people were just kind of passing through. A lot of Italian tourists who were there, just kind of vacationing, getting out of the heat, I'm sure. So I was going to be really disappointed if it was going to rain, and I kind of polled them, Mary Beth and Ben, and asked, what would you do if it started raining on the hike? And they both said they wouldn't have that much fun. And I was like, oh, dang it. Because I was stubbornly going to do it regardless. But when I was doing my research, the reason why I chose Kitzbühel is because it's close to the beginning of the Eagles Walk, which is a long-distance hiking trail in the Alps. And it's the equivalent to like the PCT or the Appalachian Trail in the U.S.
Oh, cool.
So it's awesome. And it has different stages. I can't remember like the total distance that it is, but I think they say you can take like 2 to 3 months to finish the whole thing if you really wanted to. So pretty similar to like the PCT. And we were close to the first 3 stages. And so when I was looking through the stages, stage 2 looked the coolest, and it was pretty close to Kitzbühel. And Austria is awesome in a lot of ways, and I think we'll talk about that in Vienna too, but they really care about people going outside and experiencing the outdoors. And so they have an incredible online guide for all their hiking, and it is just so thorough and so well thought out, and the maps are incredible. They'll send you a GPS map that you can plug into your phone. I mean, it's just awesome. But it's all in kilometers, and so I was doing my conversions, and it worked out for the most part, but the map that I was looking at didn't have a scale, and so I was just kind of like guesstimating how far we would go. And each of the stages is obviously, you go from the start of the stage 2 to the end of the stage 2 where you would start stage 3. So we needed to do an out and back, obviously. We couldn't just finish, and then we would just be stuck in the mountains. And so I was trying to figure out a good place to start where we could do an out and back, see some cool stuff, and then be finished in time. And for the most part, it technically worked out. Technically speaking, it worked out. But we started the hike around like 8 a.m.-ish, and we started at Hintersteiner See, which is a lake. And we started hiking up, and it's a pretty clear path, and they have signs everywhere. The signage, though, is really interesting in Austria, at least on the hikes that we were doing. It's all in time, not in distance. So it'll say to this point, it's 3 hours instead of saying, 5 kilometers. So I didn't know, is that like 10 kilometers an hour or 13 kilometers an hour that I just don't know what speed they were estimating for that or anything. And Austria is also super cool because they have these huts or hoots, Hutte, along these hikes.
It's probably not the correct pronunciation, but that's what we call them.
Yes. Or we'll call it hut just because it's easy. And our stage 2 that we were doing, had 3 huts on it. And the huts are incredible. They're these like beautiful alpine cabins that you can stay in. So if you were hiking the whole thing, you could plan to stay in these huts along the way. And then there are awesome restaurants. So you can get Wiener Schnitzel and all the other Austrian favorites and beer and have like a fantastic meal after you just hiked, 10 miles. And then you can keep going or you can stay there and hang out with people. And they're just like up in the cliffs. And I can send pictures to you guys so you can see it. But it is just, it's so cool. And it's just awesome how much they want people outside that, if you need a rest, if you need a break, if you need medical attention, that there's a hut within, 8 or so kilometers, most likely.
That's cool.
So we get past the first hut, which is not that far off from the start. It's like a kilometer or 2. We're like, okay, cool. Like, we're doing it. And I kind of know where we're going. And I screenshotted pictures of the map. And at this hut, we took a wrong turn, supposedly.
Definitely.
We took a wrong turn. And instead of like slowly meandering up, it was
straight up.
And I'm trying to be positive and say, it's like a Stairmaster outside. Or it's a great workout. And Ben and Mary Beth weren't saying a word to me. And they weren't responding to anything I said. And it was beautiful. Like we were hiking through a forest for a little bit. And then we got to this boulder field, which was pretty big. And none of us really knew how intense the hike was going to be. I didn't know what like the Austrian standard was versus the U.S. standard. And so Mary Beth is in like Nike high tops. Ben's in Chacos, which are sandals. And then I'm in just like Nike Frees, so not necessarily the hiking shoe of choice.
Disclaimer too, like we live in Washington, we do a lot of hiking, so we're not complete novices.
No.
But I was under the impression this was going to be like a forest walk. And it turned out to not be that at all. We came upon a giant snowfield past this boulder field, which is a problem if you're in Nike Freeze. So we had to circumvent this snowfield, and that took a good amount of time.
We probably spent 40 minutes in the boulder field / the snowfield when it should have taken us like 10 minutes to cross it if the snow hadn't have been there.
Yeah.
And then I lost Flat Migas. This is our cat.
Okay, but you need to describe this so we can see this, but our listeners can't see this.
It's not a cat.
Okay, so
well, it is a cat.
It is
but...
a cat.
That's not a cat.
So we have a cat named Migas. He's probably sleeping on the bed right now because we're being loud. We love him a lot and have a very intense obsession with him. And so Migas has never really experienced culture because he hates leaving the apartment. So I made this flat Migas, similar to a flat Stanley, where I printed out a picture of Migas and then duct taped it so that he would be waterproof, and then put it on a popsicle stick so that he could join us in our adventures. And it actually became a really intense game on Instagram where I would put Migas in different places wherever we were visiting, and I would put "Where's Migas?" and it was like a "Where's Waldo?" And I had a cult following.
She had fans.
I had fans who were demanding higher intensity or lower intensity, or would be really upset if they couldn't find him in the picture. So anyways, I had Flat Migas out because it was prime Flat Migas picture taking area, especially in the boulder field. But then we kind of had to like slide down the boulders at one point when we decided to go around the snowfield. And I had Migas like in my chest strap of my backpack. And then once we'd gotten down below the snowfield, I looked and he was missing.
Oh no.
Yes, exactly.
Calamity.
And at this point, Mary Beth and Ben are very mad at me and haven't been talking to me because we just had to slide down a bunch of rocks. And now we're having to hike straight uphill to get around the snowfield when we would just be going across it. And I lost Flat Migas. And the back of Flat Migas is white, and the front is pretty much white. So he matches all the boulders in the boulder field.
Oh, boy.
And I didn't know when I lost him either. And so I went back and retraced my steps. And I had my GPS on my watch the whole time, and you can see where I lost Flat Migas because the track is like this, like going around in circles and squigglies and zigzagging.
Mad panic.
Yeah, mad panic. But then I miraculously found him, obviously, because he's here now with us. And I kept him in a safe spot the rest of the time.
Yeah, so to keep the story fairly abridged, about 3 hours later, we arrive at our final hut destination, bruised and battered and tired and hungry. And Mary Beth and I are a little peeved that this forest walk had turned into a pretty serious...
An alpine hike.
An alpine adventure.
I didn't think they were going to want to go to the hut that I was trying to get us to, which I thought was only going to be like 9 kilometers round trip, was to the Grutenhoot, which looked awesome in pictures. And I really, really, really wanted to get to the Grutenhoot. But I was scared that they would want to turn back at the snowfield because it had already been like 3 hours or something. And we hadn't even made it that far. And we thought the rest of the hike was going to look like that. But it was just because we took that wrong turn when we really should have gotten to the point at the top of the snowfield in like 20 minutes from the other hut if we would have gone the right way and would not have gone straight up. But we just didn't.
Wow.
But to be fair, none of us saw signs.
No. We saw a sign at the first hut that we passed that said the Grutenhoot is 3 hours away. Mm-hmm. And then we saw a sign an hour later after the snowfield and boulder field that said Grutenhoot 3 hours away.
Yeah.
So that was a morale killer. But we made it to the Grutenhoot.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Incredible views from this building that's perched on the mountainside, essentially. We had really great food, really good beer, cold beer. And it was at that point that we made the decision to not hike back the way we came because we just couldn't face that. So we found a map, located the nearest town that we could hike down to, which was about 45 minutes away, and called a taxi to take us back to our car.
Yep.
We had already hiked 7 miles when we got to the Grutenhoot, though. So it would have been 14-mile day.
So that's a crazy day. I'm looking, I just Googled pictures of this Grutenhoot.
Yes.
It's like on the edge of the mountain, like overlooking the entire valley.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Incredible.
It's so
That's
stunning.
amazing.
And the food was really, really good. Like probably some of the best food I had in like traditional Austrian food. Mm-hmm. We got this like vegetable dish with like a spinach and cheese dumpling, and it was delicious. So we made it. And it was worth it, but then we didn't hike back like we should have. We just took the easy way out and hiked, like 30, 45 minutes down to a town called Warchensteiner Alm or something like that.
Sure.
Which is also super cool.
Just for the record, when you said that it was a hut, this is not what I pictured.
Yeah.
I would call this like a chalet or something.
Yeah.
Like
That's probably
it's
better.
big.
It's big. People stay there.
They just renovated it though, so it used to be smaller, I think, but that's definitely bigger than the first one we stopped at. The first one we stopped at was a lot smaller, and it looked more just like a restaurant. They may have had like a couple bunk beds on the inside based on the size, but this one definitely had like a whole upstairs where people could stay.
It was the luxury version.
Cool.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Well, I think we got to hear about Vienna now because, man, this is exciting. How fun.
Nothing as exciting happened in Vienna. Vienna was way more low-key. We drove from Kitzbühel to Vienna, which was, it took us about 4.5 hours, but it was a really great way to see a lot of Austria.
Oh, this is a pro tip.
Yeah.
We got in the car, and Ben and I for sure knew that from Kitzbühel to Vienna, which is pretty much across the whole country, it was like 4.5 hours. But then when we plugged it into our GPS, it said like 7.5. We're like, oh my
Whoa.
gosh, that's horrible.
Huh.
And then Mary Beth is sitting in the back, and she's putting it into her phone, and she goes, where are you guys seeing 7.5 hours? It says 4.5 hours on my phone. And we both had, since we live in Seattle, toll roads turned off so that we wouldn't take toll roads. So that was really interesting. We didn't remember to
Kept
turn
on
toll
3
roads
hours at a
off.
time.
Yeah. So,
then you paid tolls then in Austria.
I don't remember. Well, probably. I don't know.
It showed up on the rental car bill later.
Yeah. Worth it.
But it was worth it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, to save what? 3 hours of driving?
right. Especially
Yeah.
on a trip where you have limited amount of time. We thought the
Yep.
opportunity cost was pretty good there.
Yeah, for sure.
The drive was great. We got, driving is a really cool way to see a place. Really any way that you can travel by land, I think. So driving, taking a train, taking a bus, because you're able, rather than flying where, you like take off and then everything disappears and then you land and you're there. When you're driving, you get to see everything. And if you see something cool, you can pull off and check it out.
Yes.
So we were able to kind of be in these small Austrian lakeside communities that
Stunning.
never would have been on our itinerary had we not just seen them on the highway and kind of pulled off. So that was cool, getting to see kind of the transition of the Austrian scenery from the really dramatic Alps to Vienna is more in kind of a rolling countryside with the Danube River flowing through it. So we arrived in Vienna, and then from there I guess I was kind of in charge of the Vienna itinerary. I knew that there were a couple of things that I wanted to see. Vienna was the seat of the Austrian Empire for hundreds of years. It's a really opulent city in a lot of ways, really beautiful architecture, and there are 2 palaces there and the crown jewels of the Habsburg family, and so a ton of history. And so I wanted to just not necessarily like go into each of these places, but just kind of be able to walk through these areas with these with all of this history. This was a Liz special.
Yeah.
Actually.
So I researched online, Mika's did too, about a park in Vienna called Prater that has this really old Ferris wheel. And I was like, cool, Ferris wheel, we'll go see it. And we take this tram to Prater, and we're looking at the Ferris wheel like, oh cool, like an old Ferris wheel. Like we weren't going to go in it or anything, and we're kind of looking around the park. We all kept wandering, and then we wandered around this corner, and then I think the look on all of our faces was just like confusion and shock, and we just had a lot of questions because it was like we just walked into a massive like Six Flags amusement park. Like huge roller coasters and like the Scream thing and like haunted houses. I mean, it was like a big amusement park, and we just thought we were seeing an old Ferris wheel. And it was just behind there, and we couldn't hear it, and we couldn't see it before, which was just bizarre. But what's really cool about Vienna and Austria in general that I learned about doing some of my research is that it's an incredibly inclusive country, especially for lower populations, or lower income populations, sorry. So Prater, the amusement park, there's no entry fee. So where you would go to like Six Flags, or I don't know what amusement parks are up in Washington.
Wild Waves.
Wild Waves. Yeah, and pay,
That's it.
like $60 to just get in. You just walk into the park. And so you pay per ride. So we rode 2 roller coasters that were a ton of fun for like €5 each. So it's really neat. So if you maybe we're on a tighter budget, and you wanted to take your kids, you could go in and everybody could ride 3 rides and not spend, a fortune like at Disney World or something. Which I thought was
So
really
more like
neat.
going to a carnival then, where you're like paying per ride.
Yeah, but I mean the rides are awesome. Like they're really fun, big roller coaster rides. So it's not like a little carousel and that's it. It's really fun stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, in a similar vein, in
awesome.
Vienna, Vienna has an incredibly famous opera house. It was built in the 1800s. It's a beautiful building, and you kind of associate opera with very high class, high costs associated with that. But the Vienna Opera House allocates how many? 500?
Over 500 standing
Over
room
500
only
standing
tickets.
room only tickets that you can purchase for €5. Less than €5.
Wow.
The day of.
Day of, and it requires standing in line and getting there a little bit early, but if that's that makes it accessible for people. If it's something that you really want to do and you really want to experience that, and you don't have hundreds of dollars to spend on that, you can do it that way.
Yeah, and
which
there's
I
no
thought was
dress
really
code.
cool. We didn't end up doing that, but it was cool to know that's something that they have set out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the only opera house that does that, or at least that has 500 tickets, set aside for people who show up at the door.
Apparently, I just learned that, the Seattle Opera has some standing room only tickets.
That's awesome.
But it's like 10 or 15 or something.
Yeah.
So it's not 500.
Yeah.
That's
And
really
and
neat.
there's no dress code. There's no, anybody can go pretty much as long as you can pay
That's
€3
super cool.
and wait in a line for 2 hours.
Very cool. Well, any final things on Vienna or any other parts of the trip?
We flew in and out of Europe through Dublin, just because it was the cheapest that we could find. Yeah,
Dublin was cool.
Dublin was cool. We just figured since we were flying in and out, we would get back to Dublin at 2 days before our flight out, so we could kind of spend a little bit of time there. I'd never been to Ireland before. I think we were really surprised at how expensive Dublin is.
Yeah.
Compared to the rest of our trip. Vienna and Prague were both surprisingly very affordable. And I learned later that Dublin is the second most expensive city in the EU behind London.
Wow.
So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that was a little bit of a. I think when we were booking our place to stay, we were like, why is this so much more expensive than everywhere else? And that just was kind of a theme throughout Dublin, but really cool city. We had really good food there.
Yeah.
We did the Guinness tour,
Which was awesome.
which ended up being amazing.
I don't even like Guinness. I still don't like it, but I can
So you
I can
did
appreciate
the tourist thing
We did
there.
the
then.
tourist thing there, yeah, but I think it was worth it. And then we took a train out to Howth.
it. HOWTH.
It's like a 30-minute train ride from Dublin. It's out on the coast, and it's just kind of a small little fishing town. So that was really cool because I feel like
More
the
culture.
charm of Ireland is in the countryside and kind of outside the city.
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
we didn't have a whole lot of time to like rent a car and get to drive around, but we at
Sure.
least got to get out of the city a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, you said you flew in and out of Dublin. That was like your international, like from the States flight.
Yep.
But then did you do like the cheap European airlines from Dublin to the other places that you went? Is that part of like your budget conscious travel? Is that part of what that
we
was?
actually ended up flying Lufthansa on this particular trip.
For all your flights?
Well, so we flew American in and out of Dublin. And
Okay.
then Lufthansa we flew Lufthansa from Dublin to Prague, from Prague to Munich, and then
Vienna to
from Vienna to Dublin was actually Vienna Airlines.
Okay.
So we did manage to avoid Ryanair and Welling and EasyJet, but we have flown those in the past. That is definitely part of I think getting around in a budget conscious way. But
Yeah.
you definitely get what you pay for with those
Yeah.
airlines.
sure.
Well, thanks for sharing about your trip. We have a couple questions for you guys to wrap it up. So the first one is based on the title of our podcast, Take Me With You. If you could take us with you to just one thing on this trip, what would it be and why?
I'd take you on this trip to the Grooten Hoot, mainly because I'm stubborn and I want to make you do the hike. And I was going to go to the Grooten
The
Hoot.
same hike that you did, or the hike that you intended to do?
We'd go the right way, unless you wanted the
Okay.
experience of the boulder field.
I think I'm good.
Yeah.
Fun.
Meanwhile,
like hiking.
I
That
would
sounds
take
good.
you to this fantastic beer garden we went to in Prague. It was an outdoor beer garden in the Letna Park, overlooking the river and the city. We went at sunset, just had some beers outside, and it was a really pleasant evening. So that is a much chiller place to go in the Grooten Hoot.
Nice. Fun. Well, that sounds great. I'm actually going to Prague on my honeymoon in December.
Oh,
so
fun.
I'm excited to hear about some
Congratulations.
of these things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
We saw
Yeah.
pictures of it in the winter, and it looks like totally magical.
Yeah, I'm stoked. Yeah. It's going to be good. And what's your next trip?
We're saving up to go to South America. Ben speaks mostly Spanish pretty well, and he's been wanting to go to.
I've never been to South America.
Yeah, I've never been. I've been to Central America. I haven't been to South America. So we're thinking Chile and Argentina.
Nice.
Next. We do have our best friends trying to convince us to go to New Zealand instead, and he said he was going to come up with like a 40-slide PowerPoint presentation, but we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
So we're going
Now,
to stick with South America.
when are you hoping for this South America trip to happen?
Winter break. So
This year? Oh, okay.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah, we would
cool.
like to go in the winter to experience Southern Hemisphere summer
Uh-huh.
Cool.
and get out of dreary
Cool.
Seattle
yeah.
in the winter.
That'll be good timing. Yeah, that's awesome. And then you'll come back on this podcast.
You like the way she threw that in there?
Yep, of course I did. And do you have any travel questions for us?
Well, I haven't been able to listen to much of the podcast, but what's your number one place you would recommend we go that we add to our list?
See, it's hard to say number one, but
You can do
based
different
on
themes.
what you guys have described of the things that you enjoy, well, I guess, well, no, there's history there too. If you haven't been to Iceland yet, you should definitely go to Iceland. Have you guys been?
No.
Yeah,
It's on the
Iceland
list for sure.
So the hiking, like just hiking, but just even just seeing the scenery and the landscape is amazing. And then there's a fair amount of history as well, Ben. I'm not a big history person, so that's not the stuff that I focused on. But we went to whatever, like the site of the very first, parliamentary government in Europe, in the world, something like that.
Wow.
And it's like the longest running, it's like 1,000, I don't know what it, anyway. So there's some really cool history that is in Iceland as well. So, I mean, it's a really cool place. That's definitely a place I would recommend.
I mean, my favorite country is Spain. Have you guys been to Spain?
Ben studied abroad in Granada, so we went to Spain last year to revisit.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, then that is not the place I recommend.
We're definitely going back though.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So what cities have you been to in Spain?
I've just been to Madrid and Granada, and we drove from Madrid
Okay.
to Granada. We didn't really stop anywhere because it was just
Okay.
olive fields, but
Yeah,
I loved it.
and when I lived there, I obviously lived in Granada, so in Andalusia, and so the majority of my time was spent in southern Spain. So going
Okay.
to Cordoba and Sevilla, and we went out to Mallorca and Malaga, and then obviously we went to Madrid and we went to Barcelona. But I would love to spend more time spend time in northern Spain. I didn't get to explore that area.
Okay, well, in that case, that's actually my recommendation. Is northern Spain is gorgeous and it's green. Once you go over that mountain, it's just like it's so interesting because it's still Spain, but like it feels like different countries kind of too, based on where you are in northern Spain. And there's a Camino de Santiago there, so there is, like some hiking you could do. You could even do a stretch it if you wanted, but oh, Spain is so good. Yeah. So.
All right, we're going back.
Yeah.
Yes. I work for Spain tourism, by the way.
Oh, there you go.
I wish. Can I do that? Now I want to do
Just
that.
call it Spain.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd let it happen.
Yeah.
Sure, why not? All right, so we're going to move into the last segment of the podcast now called Wish You Were Here. During this segment, what we're going to do is each of us is going to share a travel attraction from all the different travels that we've done. It's kind of like one of those little postcards that have a little snapshot of one thing that said, Wish You Were Here. So Liz and Ben, you guys can start. And again, you can each do one together if you want to, or you can each do a separate one.
In the vein of Spain, unintentional rhyming there. My time in Granada. Granada is one of my favorite cities on the planet. Anybody who hasn't been should absolutely go. It's just wonderful and gorgeous, and so much history there. I love all the history. And the main attraction that Granada is most famous for is the Alhambra. It is.
Oh.
Yeah, it is. It was originally when Spain was under Moorish control, it was the seat of the Sultan. And then when the Catholics reconquered Spain, Charles V built a palace there, and it's just this incredibly well-preserved, beautiful structure that has so many different influences to it, and it's just stunning. In a really, really special place to be able to visit. The main area, the Alhambra itself is a giant castle that's surrounded by fortifications and has many different buildings. But the main palace, you need to make an appointment to go in. They only let a certain amount of people in every day and every hour because they are doing really hard work to preserve it. And it's hard to describe in words. But
it's not what I expected, but it's definitely the most awe-inspiring thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Probably because I had no expectations, which I like going into things with no expectations like that. I thought it was just going to be another castle, but it's just unbelievable. And they have a cat colony there.
Yes, most importantly.
They have a ton of cats just living their life in this really old castle, and they feed them and they take care of them. And I got a pamphlet when I left about the cat colony. That was my history that I learned, is the cat colony of the Alhambra.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, it's amazing. It's beautiful.
Cool.
Awesome. Liz?
I have two because I have a hard time following rules.
Rule
but
breaker.
the first one is, since I was born and raised in Austin, nice, would be to go to my favorite Tex-Mex place in Austin called Maudie's. It's amazing. They have really good salsa, which is something I miss in Seattle. And every time I go to Austin, it's like the first thing. My dad's like, when are we going to Maudie's? So I would go to Maudie's with you guys. And then European side, I guess. When we went to Italy and Spain last summer, we went to, I like finding like the random like little places like Kitzbühel. So I found this island called Elba. It's where Napoleon was sent off.
The first time.
Which is like an incredible place to be exiled. It's this like unbelievable island off of the coast of Italy. And I like beaches a lot, but I hate sand, and so does Ben. But these beaches are rocks, and so you don't get sand.
It's everywhere, right?
Yes, you don't get sand in your shoes, and the water is probably the most crystal clear water I've ever seen. I I mean, you could be, 8 feet above and see the bottom of the water and see all the different rocks. And I love swimming. I love being in the water too. So that's probably why that would be my number one. There was some cliff jumping nearby, and it was also just like a local Italian holiday spot. So there weren't a lot of tourists. It was just very low key, very chill, and just a nice, like, beautiful pocket on the side of Italy that I don't think people would normally visit.
Nice.
So definitely recommend that.
Cool. Cheryl, what's your wish you were here?
Mine this week is in Hawaii on the island of Oahu, and it is the Pearl Harbor Memorial. So it is gorgeous. Like, I don't know, memorials are so weird because they're so sad and also they can be so beautiful. And I think what I like about them is they're so intentionally done. And I mean, this one is like definitely like quite a level of creepy and beautiful because it is on the water over the sunken ship. And so, like, it just, even if you look at a picture of it from above, it's just like very odd to see this like white long building on the water, like, that goes across this boat that you can see, and but it's just it's I think a really important memorial to go visit. It's more of like a recent like thing that happened in our country, and so it's interesting. Obviously, it didn't happen in our lifetimes, but we know people who it's just still within, like, people talking about it being a thing that happened and remembering that event and everything. And so but I was actually just reading about it online, and the idea to have a memorial there was actually from Robert Ripley of Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Oh, weird.
When he visited but he visited the site and then was like talking about it on a radio broadcast and said that, like, we need to pay tribute to the people in Pearl Harbor. And so they started getting this idea together. But it's a gorgeous one, and I think a important thing to visit out in Hawaii. So yeah.
Nice.
How about you, Ryan?
So I've got one that's back out in Slovenia again because I love Slovenia. And that was the other place that I was thinking about, like, if you've never been, I might recommend Slovenia because it is
up there
beautiful.
for me.
Oh,
Honestly, it was
I
because
love
of an
Slovenia.
episode of Chef's Table that I saw, but it looks awesome.
Slovenia is amazing. I've been many, many times. I have lots of friends that live over there.
Oh, cool.
I've not been to the entire country yet. There's still plenty of places that I would like to go, but there are some really, really cool places. One of the things that Slovenia has is it has quite a few underground caves. And there's one that's like really famous, and it's the one that gets advertised in Ljubljana, and that is the most touristy, and I've never been to that one. So I'm not going to talk about that one. I'm going to talk about the one that I have been to, and I'm going to not say it completely correctly, but this will be my best attempt at pronouncing Slovene. So I apologize to any of my Slovene friends who might be listening to this who know that I'm going to say it wrong. But it's Škocjan. So it's S with a hat on it, which is the sh sound, K-O-C, which they say is ts, and then J-A-N, and the J is the Y sound. So
Whoa.
anyway, so it's not the way you would expect to pronounce it if you were just pronouncing it in English. But anyway, the cave's there, and it's super, super cool. So you do a tour, and some of the stuff they have, like, lights, and it's lit, and you can see, the different kind of formations underground. At one point, you're in this just huge, just open cavern, and you're like looking above you, and you realize that the ceiling above you is actually like the bottom of the ground if you were up on the surface of the earth, which is just cool. And then, like, there's like the stalactites and the stalagmite formations. And then you like wander out into this area that like totally opens up, and there's this river that's running. It's an underground river that runs through it. And they have a mark at one point on the wall of this one time, and maybe this was multiple times, but I remember just the story that our guide told us was this one time where there was just a massive amount of water. I don't know if it was a lot of flooding or what the thing was, but this massive amount of water, and how high that river went in the cave, and it's like hundreds of feet above where the river level actually is at that time. And it's just crazy to think of that much additional water in there. But it's beautiful. It's nice because it's cool because it's underground. And it's just a really, really fun. I wouldn't describe it as a hike because most of the pathways, I don't know if they're paved, but they're very, very clear and they're delineated, and you go along with a guide or whatever. So it's not really a hike, but it's definitely walking for a fair amount, which I enjoy. And there's some really cool, just kind of geologic features to see. So
Sounds awesome.
that would be mine that I would recommend.
Let's go to Slovenia.
Cool.
Okay.
And if you guys decide to go to Slovenia, let me know. I got plenty of other things to
Yeah,
tell you about.
definitely.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's episode. If you would be so kind as to follow us on social media, we are at Timwy Podcast. That's at TMWY Podcast. Liz and Ben are going to share some pictures with us, so we'll post some pictures from their awesome trips. You can see that on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram.
You can also email us at timwepodcast@gmail.com. Send us your travel questions, travel stories. What family pet do you travel with a photo of? We want to know. Email us there.
You can also call us and leave us a voicemail at 406-763-8699, or the other way to remember that is 406 Pod Timwy, and you can leave us all the same stuff that you did as an email, except if you leave us a voicemail, we might be able to play your voicemail on the air. That's right.
Fancy.
I know. And while you're thinking about all of these fancy things, why don't you get yourself all fancy and rate and review us on whatever it is you're listening to this podcast on right now to help other people be able to hear these cool stories as well. You can also subscribe to our podcast to make sure you don't miss an episode when they release on Mondays. And if you can share about our podcast with others so that more people can hear the really cool stories that our guests share, that would be awesome.
As always, thank you to Beth Reed Miller for our awesome artwork. You can check out more of her artwork at Beth Is Something. And thank you to Erica Corbin for the use of her song Round the Globe. You can check out Erica's music wherever music is sold or streamed.
Well, last time, Liz and Ben, thank you so much for joining us. This was great. I loved hearing about all of your travels.
Thank you.
Yay.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks for having us.
All right, well, that'll do it for this week's episode. And until next time, remember to take me with you.
Take me with you.
All the world is out there waiting to